History remembers Vlad the Impaler for the forests of impaled soldiers he left behind. But the stories of his battlefield atrocities don't even come close to what was said about what he did to the women in his own kingdom. This isn't just a story about a cruel king. It's a story about how nightmares are made and how propaganda can create a monster far more terrifying than any fictional beast. This is the horrifying, often told story of Vlad's alleged obsession with female chastity and the sadistic punishments recorded in pamphlets designed to create the image of a monster. And as we unravel it, we have to ask ourselves, where does the man end and the monster begin? Before the stakes and the screaming, there was a boy. Vlad III was born around 1431 in Transylvania, son of a nobleman named Vlad Dracula. His father was in the Order of the Dragon, a group of knights sworn to protect Christian Europe from the Ottoman Empire. The name Dracula meant the dragon, and his son, Vlad, would become known as Dracula, son of the dragon. But in modern Romanian, Dracula took on a new meaning: the devil, a fitting name for the man he'd become. Vlad's childhood wasn't easy. It was a brutal education in power and betrayal. At just 11, he and his younger brother Radu were given to the Ottoman Sultan as political hostages to guarantee their father's loyalty. For years, Vlad lived in the heart of the empire he was born to fight, learning the language and tactics of his captors. Some historians believe the brothers may have endured profound abuse during this time, trauma that could have planted the seeds of paranoia and rage that defined Vlad's life. He was surrounded by enemies and taught that survival depended on absolute ruthlessness. When he finally returned to his homeland of Wallachia, it was in chaos. His father had been murdered, and his older brother, Mircea, had been brutally killed by treacherous nobles known as boyars. Some accounts claim Mircea was blinded with a red-hot poker and buried alive. For Vlad, this wasn't just politics, it was personal. At 24, he stormed back into Wallachia, killed his family's murderer, and took the throne in 1456. The helpless hostage was now a prince, and he was ready to forge a new order, an order built on fear. The lessons he learned in captivity were about to be unleashed on his own people. Vlad's first move was to crush the power of the boyars who had betrayed his family. He didn't just want to defeat them, he wanted to make a terrifying example of them. The story goes that on Easter Sunday, he invited hundreds of nobles to a grand feast. Once they were full of food and wine, his soldiers surrounded them. The older boyars were impaled on the spot. The younger ones were forced to march 50 miles to the ruins of a castle and rebuild it with their bare hands. Very few survived. With this one bloody act, Vlad's philosophy became clear: absolute obedience or absolute agony. He began a reign of terror where any crime, from theft to lying, was met with swift, horrific punishment. His weapon of choice, the one that earned him his name, was impalement. It was a deliberately slow and agonizing execution, a public spectacle meant to terrorize everyone into submission. This brings us to the legends of his so-called moral crusade, a famous tale which is almost certainly folklore, tells of a golden cup placed at a public fountain in his capital, Targovist. Vlad declared that anyone could drink from it, but it must never be stolen. Throughout his entire reign, in a land filled with poverty, the golden cup was never touched. It was a symbol of his absolute law. This obsession with order allegedly bled into the private lives of his people, especially women. But it's here that we have to be extremely cautious. While Vlad's cruelty is a historical fact, the most graphic and sexually violent stories about him don't come from reliable chronicles. They come from German and Russian pamphlets printed decades after his reign, likely funded by his political rivals. These were the 15th century equivalent of a tabloid smear campaign, designed to paint him as an inhuman monster, and they worked incredibly well. According to these propaganda pamphlets, Vlad had a pathological obsession with female chastity. They claimed any woman accused of adultery, or any maiden who wasn't a virgin on her wedding night, was singled out for uniquely sadistic punishments. These lurid accounts, which modern historians view as fabrications, describe horrific acts, like women having their sexual organs cut out or their breasts severed. The most infamous story from these German sources, and one for which there is no credible evidence, describes women being impaled on red-hot stakes, not through the torso, but through the vagina, so the stake would slowly emerge from their mouths. These tales transformed a brutal but strategic political leader into a depraved monster. The propaganda was so successful that for centuries, these sensational claims have been repeated as fact, blurring the line between Vlad the Prince and Vlad the Fiend. Another apocryphal story claims Vlad invited all of the poor and sick of his land to a great feast. After they ate their fill, he supposedly barred the doors and burned the hall to the ground, declaring he was ridding them of their earthly troubles and reducing the burden of poverty. These legends, whether about sexual purity or social cleansing, all served to build the image of a ruler whose power was absolute and whose wrath was inescapable. The peak of Vlad's reign came in 1462. The Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed the Conqueror, marched on Wallachia with a massive army of over 90,000 men. Vlad was hopelessly outnumbered. Unable to win in open battle, he turned Wallachia itself into a weapon. He burned his own villages, poisoned wells, and waged a relentless guerrilla war. But his masterpiece of psychological warfare awaited them outside his capital. As Mehmed's army approached Targoviste, they were met with a scene from hell, a forest of the impaled. Contemporary accounts which were prone to exaggeration, claimed there were 20,000 bodies of captured Turkish soldiers and collaborators, each rotting on a stake. More recent scholarship suggests the number was likely closer to 1,600, but the effect was the same. The stench of death was overwhelming. The sight was so monstrous that even the battle-hardened Ottoman army was shaken. The Sultan himself reportedly conceded that a man who could do such things was beyond his power to defeat. While Vlad's brutal tactics repelled the invasion, they also sealed his fate. His cruelty, both real and exaggerated, had made him infamous. The German Saxon merchants in neighboring Transylvania, whose people he had impaled, helped fund the propaganda that destroyed his reputation. Eventually, betrayed by the Hungarian king he thought was his ally, Vlad was arrested and imprisoned for over a decade. He would rule one last time, briefly, in 1476, but his power was gone. He was killed in battle that same year, and his head was sent to the Sultan in Constantinople as a trophy. So, who was Vlad the Impaler? To many Romanians, he remains a national hero, a brutal but just ruler who defended his homeland and brought order to a lawless land. To the rest of the world, thanks to centuries of sensational stories and Bram Stoker's novel, he is Dracula, the monster. The historical reality is somewhere in the murky depths between the two. He was, without a doubt, a ruthless tyrant who used terror as a tool of the state. His use of impalement was real and horrific. But the most perverse and sexualized atrocities linked to his name are almost certainly the product of a brilliant and malicious propaganda campaign, one that has defined his legacy for over 500 years. Perhaps the most horrifying part of Vlad's story isn't just the impaled bodies. It's how easily the man was erased and replaced by the monster. The lines between his actual deeds and the fictions created by his enemies have become so blurred that today the myth is more real than the man. The true terror of Vlad the Impaler isn't just what he did, but what the world was made to believe he did. What's your verdict on Vlad? Was he a misunderstood hero, a mad tyrant, or the victim of history's most successful smear campaign? Let me know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the darkest chapters of history, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching.